Out here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastauugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week it's going to be the turn of the bass player and musician and singer. It is the one and only Alice Genese, who I spoke to very recently to find out more about life, love and poetry. One-time member of, she's been in a lot of bands, including Gut Bank, there's Sexpod, and more recently Psychic TV, but has got a new musical project on, as well as doing a solo album a few years ago. So I will put those links in the notes below. But this is the interview with Alice. So after several minutes of interesting but casual chat, we get down to that exciting subject that was the early formative years. Alice, it's over to you.
I think my first musical awakening was when I was very young, and it was all Motown. So, I was listening to Gladys Knight and James Brown and the Jackson 5 and Smokey Robinson and I don't on and on and on.
Yes.
Because I love to dance, and it was great music to dance to. So that was, I guess, in the late 60s. And then in the 70s, I started to discover David Bowie and Patti Smith. And then I went on to become like a huge, like Bauhaus and Cure fan. And, I don't know. I went through a lot of phases in my life. I didn't collect records. I just couldn't really afford them when I was younger. But I listened to music, and I was a college radio DJ.
Oh, brilliant!
I guess I was like 19 or 20 years old. I did that for a couple of years. So I felt like I had this massive record collection, but it was all it all belonged to the school that I was going to.
Yes, this is true.
But it was great, and it really exposed me to a lot of different types of music. And the other thing for me that was great was that I grew up in Hoboken in New Jersey, which is right across the river from New York City, from Manhattan, like literally between the Holland and the Lincoln Tunnel. So there was this very well-known club in Hoboken called Maxwell's, and the bands would play there. And it was one of those places where if a band was going to play in New York, they might do an off night in Hoboken because it was a 10-minute journey across the river. So I got to see tons of different bands there.
Yes.
Which was great. Yeah, it was.
Was it a bit like the Boston? Because I know there was a book that came out on the Boston sort of, I don't know, scene. This one here, which he says, well, someone took this photograph. But so a lot of British bands kind of went over. They did sort of, I don't know, New York, Boston. Was it a little bit like that on the circuit that you just thought, well, now you're here, you might as well do this Maxwell's as well?
Yeah, pretty much the same. So it was pretty great. I saw some, I can't even remember all the shows I've seen it, but, some of my favorite ones were, I saw X. I used to love seeing The Fall. I saw Soundgarden before they were Soundgarden in a small venue. There was a band called X-Rays. No, who was it? No, I can't remember their names.
Was it Polystyrene?
No, it wasn't. There was another band that I can't remember. Naked Raygun. I think they were a band from Chicago. So there was I just saw some really amazing shit. I saw Husker Du. I played with Husker Du there, actually.
That's fantastic. Yes, that's very good. Were your parents at all musical? Did they give you any musical direction in life?
My mom and her sisters were always singing. They always did 3-part harmonies around the holidays. They would sing, holiday typical Christmas songs, but they would sing them in German. So they grew up in a relatively, I guess their father was from Germany. I'd never met him. He passed before I was born, but I guess he was German, and they went to some German societies, and they were all singing in German. So they still, from time to time, my mom and her sisters are all in their 70s and early 80s now, and they'll still sing Silent Night in 3-part harmony. It's pretty cute.
Oh, fantastic. I know, the German version's so much nicer, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
So when did they come over to America from Germany?
Well, it was just my mom's dad. The
Right.
rest of her mom was born here. They were, I think, maybe third generation born in America. So my mom's family has been actually in Hoboken for several generations. My mother still lives in Hoboken.
Yes.
Um, yeah, and then I guess her dad came over as a teenager.
And that was
Um,
it.
yeah.
You found your place. And did you have any kind of brothers or sisters, an older brother or sister that kind of influenced you at all in sort of any musical direction?
No, I don't know how this all happened. I mean, I was always musical. I think, my mom did play piano, but not anything, professionally, just sort of out of, for fun.
Yes.
We had a piano in the house growing up. So I had taken lessons when I was young. I am the world's worst pianist. I I just didn't catch on to it. And then I studied flute and I learned basic guitar chords, which is pretty much all I can still play on guitar, like the basic chords. And somehow I've been able to make a career out of it, um, by, getting people who play much better than me
Yeah.
to,
Well, this is
to
kind of
work.
I think it was kind of Lemmy from Motorhead, wasn't it? Well, he was in Hawkwind and then he was in the Rock and Vickers. I think he was a kind of a rhythm guitarist, but realized he was never going to be very good at it. So he went and sort of went for, I think somehow found himself sort of auditioning for Hawkwind, and the bass player didn't turn up, but he'd left his gear, and Lemmy picked it up and just became part of Hawkwind for those few years before forming Motorhead. So the bass is one of those instruments, isn't it? So was there any bass player that you kind of you looked at and thought, yes, that's going to be my instrument, or did you just kind of stumble on it?
I did actually when I was probably 17 or 18. Or maybe I was 18 or 19. I was at a club in New York City. It was called the Mud Club.
Oh
This
yes,
was years and years and years ago. I mean, I barely even remember it, but I saw
oh
a
my
band
god,
called, oh, wow, that's amazing. That's so great.
we love the
Uh,
Mud Club, don't we?
yeah, it was pretty incredible. From what I can remember, because I was young, and I'm now 62. So yeah, so that's a long time ago for me. I went to the Mud Club. I think I was with a friend or a boyfriend at the time, and I saw a band called ESG. They were this band of three women, very funky, soulful band, and the bass player was incredible. And I always knew I've always been writing songs in my head, even since I was, younger. Um, I mean, I can remember being like 12 or 13 and just always having music. I always call it my radio head because
Yes.
it just doesn't shut up sometimes. But I saw ESG and I was watching her play bass, and I just felt like it was a pivotal moment for me where I was like, you know what? I really want to do that. I really want to play bass. Like I feel like that was going to be the instrument for me. And also, I did study dance for a very, very long time. Like I was, studied ballet and jazz and modern dance. And I felt I've always been very connected musically through my body.
Hmm.
And bass playing just sort of made a lot of sense to me.
Yes. Well,
Um,
yeah.
and,
I was going to
and then
say
I picked,
I was going to say your bass chakra was probably sort of resonating with the sort of vibrational quality of the bass, really, wasn't it?
yeah. I picked up bass, and it was, I was with a friend who, I just went to jam with my friend in some basement somewhere in New Jersey, and she just remarked like it seemed like I'd always played. Like it didn't seem like it was the first time I ever played. I just picked it up and I was able to play. I don't even know how or why, but maybe because I did have some musical training and it wasn't.
Yes. So you knew
Um,
the kind of structure of how songs come together and how they work.
yeah, yeah. I mean, as a music lover, um, I guess not every music lover understands the structure of a song, but it came very easily to me. And,
Yes.
I mean, obviously I put in my thousands and thousands of hours of practicing. Um, but
I
yeah,
know.
I love it.
I
I
know.
haven't,
I was going to say, we know that Malcolm Gladwell kind of quote, isn't it, about sort of the hours of practice you have to put into to
I
get that
really
kind of
do.
way. Did you start playing when you had left school? Were you still at school before? Yes, when the bass appeared in your life.
I was still in school, but it was, university. I was in college when I started playing bass. Probably about 20, 21. I'm not really sure how old I was.
Right.
Um, yeah. And then that was it. I just played bass ever since.
Yes, God, your discography is amazing. So I know, because I was going through your career. That's amazing. There's not many gaps, are there? But a really amazing range. So when we, in the UK, like 79, we have, Thatcher gets in. By then, you would probably be about 20 then. And then, in the U, so we had that sort of punk and then that post-punk period, and you mentioned the Fall, and we had, you had the Pistols and the Buzzcocks and the Clash and various bands like Susan the Banshees, and then, bands like the Gang of Four and I suppose Magazine, Public Image Limited, and then slowly it kind of morphed into a bit of an indie scene with people like Echo and the Bunnymen and Simple Minds New Too, and then the Smiths. And the UK was kind of really poor at that stage. We had the sort of the Thatcher government, then we had the Falkland War, then we had Greenham Common. We thought we were going to be nuked, and then there was the miners' strike. So what was it like for you during that early 80s period, which was quite a transformative moment?
I think, for me in the early 80s, I was just trying to figure out who I was. It's like, what am I going to do with my life? I think I was still in college. I guess I never graduated. I ended up leaving and finding a job in fashion for some weird reason. And then, it was just, for me, it was just about playing music. I was lucky enough, I guess it was in 83, with the help of some money from my grandmother, I was able to buy an apartment in Hoboken. So I was obviously very concerned about paying mortgage in my early 20s, and, keeping any kind of a job to keep the roof over my head, and still somehow juggling trying to play music. And then, yeah, I mean, I didn't, I felt like for me, I was sort of oblivious. I think as a younger American person, I mean, I was always, protesting anything pro women, and, like I was very aware of people's human rights around me, but I don't feel like my world was affected in the way that people in the UK were affected by, worrying about being at war. I don't feel like our country was as concerned at that
Mm.
moment.
Yes, I guess it was a bit more to do with I don't know. We seem to be sort of always on the sort of we had a lot of anxiety in the 80s.
Yeah. Well, you also, I mean, you also had wars on your lands. We really haven't had, apart from the Civil War, we've been relatively, I mean, I'm not going to say that we've been safe, but I feel like we've had a different, we definitely were able to lead a different kind of a lifestyle. And I
Yes.
think, whether it's right or wrong, I think a lot of Americans have felt, that we were in a safer environment. I don't know that
Yes.
that's completely true, but I think that that's maybe that was just my mindset. I don't
I
know.
suppose we had going back a bit further, we had, some 39 to 45 was the Second World War. And, and there was the Americans came over in about 42, wasn't it? Sort of, they call it the friendly invasion, because we had about 30 American Air Force bases in this country, in this kind of region on the East Coast, which is where I'm based. And so, we had all these Americans come over, and that was like an interesting time because it left, though the war was kind of apparently won, it left the country bankrupt for several decades instead.
Right. Yeah.
We were still paying that off until the 90s, apparently, so the Great Debt. So that was
Right.
a bit unfortunate. But then, at the same time, and this is a bit of a sweeping statement, I think during the 80s, there was a lot of tension and a lot of poverty, which is kind of interesting because it did create a lot of amazing music, and a lot of people were kind of just so angry about it, which is strange now that people reminisce about the 80s so much, because I keep always wanting to say, yeah, but we were kind of moaning a lot. The British moan, okay? We love to moan. And, and we did moan, but, the music was great. We were just a bit fed up most of the time, but I don't think the British changed that much, really. So, yeah, so then we had bands like the Smiths came in. Then we had this kind of like was it Red Wedge movement, with people like the Redskins, and they would, turning over the government because everyone was finding it very repressive with the Thatcher government, because when she came into power, she wasn't very popular. Then the Falkland War, and suddenly she became as popular as the Queen virtually, and that kind of created this kind of character that Maggie became, which was this like you were either on the right or the left, and the right were the yuppies who were having a great time, and the left were all
right.
sort of like myself, were sort of whinging and moaning and feeling repressed. And then but we did have a great soundtrack. So you that was the upside of that period. But then you formed your first band, which was called Gut Bank. So how did this band?
Well, it was I was I had a friend from college, my friend Karen. She was we were talk about music all the time. We both were going to different clubs in New York City and Hoboken. She was going to other clubs in New Jersey. I didn't go out in New Jersey as often because I was really only 10 minutes away from New York City, really. So it was easy just to jump on a bus or a train to get to Manhattan. And we liked the same kinds of music. And she was a guitar player and a singer. And Karen is the singer and guitar player of Gut Bank. And I decided that I wanted to play bass, and I got a bass, and we started playing, and that was it.
Yes, my God.
We wrote songs together, and I guess I was about 22, maybe at that point. And that was it. That was the beginning of my musical journey. Really was being the bass player for Sexpod, and we got really, I do think that we were lucky in a lot of ways because we were noticed by people who could help. Steve Fallon, who was the owner or one of the owners of the club called Maxwell's that I've spoken of already.
Yes.
Took a shine to us and signed us to his relatively newly formed record label called Coyote Records. And it was distributed through Twin Tone Records from, Minnesota. And we were able to record an album. I guess at that point, it was like maybe 1986 or something.
So this was the Dark Ages, which came out as, because was engineered by a guy who I interviewed probably a year ago, Martin BC.
BC, yeah, it's amazing.
So did you go to his famous studio?
We did. We went to his studio in Brooklyn, and we recorded it actually at I can't remember the name of the studio in Minnesota. I'd have to look at the record. I don't even know if I can find it right now. But we recorded it in Minnesota, and then Martin mixed it in New York.
Right. God, the very hip label, the very hip sort of recording studio. Can you remember much about it?
I do not remember much, but I remember he wore the same color clothing every day. He always wore sort of a black pant and maybe purple shirt or a blue shirt. I can't remember, but I always thought it was amazing that what a wonderful idea to just have a simple wardrobe where, you're not wearing the same clothes every day, but you're sort of wearing the same colors every day. And you don't have to think that hard about it.
Yes, this is true. I can't remember what band it was. It might be Psychic TV, where everyone lived in the house and you put all your clothes in a box and you just got up in the morning and picked them up. Was that
that was Psychic TV, but it might have been Psychic TV, or it might have been Throbbing Gristle or Clone.
Oh, it was Throbbing Gristle, wasn't it?
Yeah. No, that was very much a Genesis moment. I've definitely heard that story from Jen.
Yes. So when did you discover, going back to the album, when did you discover your singing voice? Because you mentioned the bass and dancing, but singing, did that come together quite easily?
I mean, again, I grew up in a family where a lot of women were singing, so I would also sing. We would sing around holidays, and it's kind of a funny thing, but in our family, yeah, we did sing. And I think I might have been in the chorus in high school. I was in the chorus, I think, in high school or junior high school. I can't remember. Yeah, I think I was in the high school chorus. So I've always known that I can sing, but I have a very gravelly voice. So I never really thought of myself as a lead singer. That I was always very good at harmonizing. So Karen was the lead singer in Gut Bank and also in Sexpod. So I was always able to harmonize with her, and she had a much higher voice. I have a very low voice, so it was easy for me to double her vocals an octave below her, and I thought it was a kind of cool sound.
Yes. Sounds, yeah, I love your vocals on your latest album or EP, which I've been listening to, which has been good. So with that, just going back though, so with most bands that I've interviewed, they have a kind of a bit of a 5-year narrative. They have that first, 12 months, the honeymoon, they sort of get a sound together, they get a single. And in this country, which is tiny, let's face it, we had 3 weekly music papers like the NME's Melody Making Sounds, and we had people like John Peel, who was this DJ on Radio 1, which kind of gives people a lot of access. So, people get that first single, they get a play on John Peel, they tour around the country in their little transit van, and then, the album comes out, everything's going good, then the second album, a bit tricky, third, and it's all over. So what was the kind of the story of your first band? How, because you last about 5 years, don't you?
I think it was a little bit longer than that. There were the usual. There was interband issues, and there was at one point a relationship within the band, and it just, things don't always work out that way when you mix those two together. And I had a child in 1988. I had a boy, my son, and it got too hard at one point, and I think I might have been the one who had to walk away for a
Right.
while because it was just too. We were young, and it just started to feel really dysfunctional. And I was in a different place, and I think sadly, the drummer who was with us has passed on, but I think everybody would have their different version of a story. My story was that I felt like it was becoming dysfunctional, and I had to kind of walk away from it.
Yes, no, well, absolutely. I mean, I know I saw the photograph of the band. Everyone does look so young, don't they?
Well, we were young.
You
We were
were
all
young,
young once.
but it was also different. So then, because a lot of things that sort of I noticed with the 80s, it's a bit tricky being a band. There's a musical zeitgeist, if you're lucky to be part of. And then after a certain period of time, there's another musical sort of scene that happens. And in this country, towards the late 80s, there was this sort of introduction of ecstasy, and another wave of 16, 18-year-olds come along, and then people want to dance. And then there's the Seattle kind of grunge scene that comes along. So a lot of indie bands that I loved just thought, you know what? Even though they weren't that much older, they're not really that old at all, but they just thought, actually, we're just not part of this scene anymore. The music press don't really care about us. And that's where they collapsed. So what was it like? I know you said you sort of finished the band for probably, lots of stuff to do with children and blah, 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 but what was it like for you sort of getting back into another band during that kind of early part of the 90s decade?
I think Karen and I started, talking about music again and playing music again. And we always had a really great chemistry. And it just sort of started naturally, as most things do. Hey, do you want to come over? I'm going to play some new stuff. And I put a bass line down, and it was great. We thought it was great. And then we just went back into writing together again, and we found a different drummer. And that was Sexpod. I think that was in 1990.
Right.
So I guess I think I left Gut Bank. Gut Bank might have ended in like 89, because I actually remember, this is going to be a strange story, but I remember going to play a show in Boston, and I was still nursing my son, so I was sort of expressing milk.
Yes,
and I was very, this is, I am a woman, and I was a mother, and I was traveling, and, my son was 6 months old probably. And I was giving the bartender milk to put in the freezer for me, so I didn't waste it. So it was yeah, I guess I was still playing after my son was born.
Yes.
But yeah, there were all sorts of issues. Again, we were in our 20s, and it was a really, you're in your 20s, lots of crazy stuff happens. And
yeah, my God, absolutely. I know. I remember hearing Suzanne Vega talk about her European tour after a few years of being, very successful, but having a small child on tour, and, every day was kind of a very traumatic, trying to feed the baby, just things like plug sockets, kind of trying to find, the right plug socket in hotels, babies kind of the baby being ill, suddenly having to go, right, that's it, I've got to go on stage now. And just that kind of stress of everything going on.
yeah.
he said it was not good. It was not good for anyone, really.
It's a struggle. I mean, you really do have to. It's a lot of work to try to balance that.
I can imagine. My God, I mean, it's hard enough when you're on your own, but let alone without any other people. But then, when sort of your second band, Sexpod, comes along, is the kind of creative process quite similar? With the new drummer.
Yeah. I mean, again, it was pretty much Karen and I in the front. She was playing guitar and singing, and I was playing bass and doing backup vocals. And we had this drummer called Billy Luce, who came in. I don't remember exactly. I think we met Billy through another band. Not sure. I don't remember how that worked. I don't remember how we met Billy. That's so funny. Anyway, he became our drummer, and we recorded an EP together at one point, and then we did eventually sign to Slab Records, and we got a different drummer. We went back to the same drummer that we were in with Gutbank. So it was basically Gutbank was reformed under a new name now called Sexpod. And then we went in and we did a full length album.
Because
And
with
that
your
was called
the first kind of extended sort of EP or mini album, that's called Home, and that was on Go-Kart Records, wasn't it?
that's correct. That was Home. And then Goddess Blues was on Slab Recordings, which was I guess it was distributed by BMG.
Yes, my God, that's amazing. And that one, now this band takes you right up to the end of the decade and millennium, really, don't you? Where we were, I don't know if you were getting freaked out or excited about the Millennium Bug, but that was, so what was it like once the album came out, Goddess Blues? Did you tour that album?
We did. We did some US touring, but it wasn't really that extensive. I mean, we didn't have, I think it's a little bit, it's hard in America. It's a bigger country to tour through, and it's expensive. Touring can be very expensive, and there wasn't a whole lot of tour support. And we did get some great shows, and we got some, we did some festivals and bigger like touring trips, like the summer giant tours where 12 bands are playing, and sort of a festival tour. We did one that was called the Roar Tour. We did a couple of Warped Tour dates. We never went on a full tour, but we would do like 5 or 6 in a row. Yeah, and then we were opening for artists like Joan Jett. We did on the Roar Tour. I guess Iggy Pop was headlining one of those festivals. So we did some great shows, and then again it just all sort of fell apart, as
Yes.
things sometimes do.
Yes. Did you because at that stage there was the music scene had become very laddish, hadn't it? How was that? Did that have any impact on the band? I mean, let's face it, we just all saw Woodstock 99, didn't we? And we're all sort of traumatized by that experience and thinking, oh my God, I'd forgotten that, a lot of bands were like getting to be a bit blokey and a bit laddish and quite horrendous.
Yeah. I mean, it was really a man's world here. It was all the guys who were getting signed. We, as 3 women in a band, we were, and I don't want to say it was because we were women, but I do kind of think it was because we were women. We were getting looked over a lot. There were a lot of big labels that sort of scouted us, but then didn't know where to put us. They didn't know what category we fit in. We weren't cutesy. We were really, good, loud rock and roll.
Yes.
And everybody could play. Like, we really held our own. And I think the songs still hold up to this day, but we just never really got that big break. There was always that carrot dangling that kept you going. I mean, I'm not going to say that it kept us going. I still write music all the time, and whether there was something, it's not like there's a lot of record label interest. I still write music. It's just, at the end of the day, I think if you really are a musician, it's what you do, and you don't do it just to, find or be successful. You do it because it's who you are, and that's kind of where I am right now.
I know. Yeah, well, it is interesting because I sort of speak to so many musicians over the last few years from, that period. I mean, music kind of did mean so much during, that period or a certain era. And then sort of a lot of people have to say, then sort of think, I do need to get a bit of a day job. I do need to get paid.
Right.
But music is still kind of there, kind of always tapping them on the shoulder saying, do you want to do some more music again, either with the original band or various members or new community. It's like I still, people still really want to make music and just, put it on Bandcamp and just enjoy that process and play a few shows here and there when they can fit it in with their day job mostly. So it is interesting how that process works and how important it is to so many creative people, obviously yourself included. So so once that band finished, you have a few others, don't you, before you launch into your mega moment with so you do Candy Ass next, don't you?
Yeah, Candy Ass was two friends, my friend Hopi and Galadriel, and Mary Catherine was our drummer. She's a great drummer, by the way. I was asked to audition for them. They were going on the road with Pink as a direct support, and I got to a place. I guess I was like 40, and I just thought maybe I'm done. Maybe I just don't want to do this anymore. I felt like I think there was a moment in my life where I felt like music had let me down. Like I was in these bands. I do feel like both Gut Bank and Sexpod were always 10 years ahead of the curve. Like I feel like Gut Bank could have fit in with the Riot Girl type, category of music, but that happened 10 years after, we released music. And then Sexpod, I don't know. I don't know where that would have fit in. I don't know if it ever would have fit in, but it didn't. It just didn't really work. And I think I got to the point where I was still, a youngish mom. My son was, at that point maybe 10 or 12 years old, and I just thought maybe I just need to get a real job. Like I always had jobs, but I just felt like maybe I need something a little bit more secure. So I went out and I was working as a jeweler, as a bench jeweler for many years, for a woman who became my friend, and she's lovely, and we're still friends to this day. And at some point she moved to Denver. I went out and I got a job in the city as a merchandiser and a designer in the jewelry industry at one of the bigger companies. And it was a 9 to 5, 40-hour a week job. I was miserable, but I felt like that's what I was supposed to do. And for a minute, I just kind of decided that I was going to hang up music, and I felt horribly depressed about it. So anyway, these girls called me and they said, we'd like you to audition to go on tour with Pink. And I struggled with it because it would have been hard to be away for 3 months, or 2 months at a time. And I was, at that point, I was a single mom, and I was trying to keep food on the table for my son and juggle everything. And I said no. I said I wouldn't do it. And they auditioned other people and took someone on, and it didn't work for them. And I told them if it didn't work to call me, maybe I would reconsider. And they called me, and I reconsidered, and I ended up being in the band, and did a couple of weeks on the road as a tour support, direct support for Pink. And it was really fun. And I took the time off, I kept the job, and I took time off as holiday. And I went back in, and people were like, "Oh, how was your, your vacation?" And I was like, "Oh, it was great. I visited this city and that city," but I never told them what I did.
Yes, I know. Yes, you could have that classic one that everyone does. Again, I feel like I need another holiday now after that holiday. It's
yeah, seriously. I really did.
Yes.
I really did.
And what was it like being on such a major, production number with someone like Pink?
Well, I mean, we were still we were driving vans ourselves. It wasn't like we were, we weren't on a tour bus or getting pampered in any way. But it was great. I mean, she's incredible. She's one of the most talented musicians I've met. Like she's honestly, I was completely blown away. And I never played in, in stadium arenas or anything. So it was it was just an amazing experience. It really was. Wouldn't trade it for anything.
No, absolutely. It's always nice to see how the how the other side of showbiz works, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
It is quite well. It's great,
Yeah,
you know,
for
because I
sure.
think everyone wants to have a little moment. So then, did that morph into kind of Pretty Boys? Then was that kind of a
That's
spin-off of Candy Yes?
yeah. Pretty Boys was just a spin-off, and we really didn't do much. I mean, I did that all the time, knowing that Psychic TV was sort of bubbling in the background. I had been friends with the drummer Eddie O'Dowd for a long time, and after Sexpod ended, he just sort of he knew that I was kind of feeling disheartened by everything, and even though I was doing Candy S and I was doing Pretty Boys at that point, I always knew that the Psychic TV thing was in the works. And during that period of time, I guess it was from 90, maybe 99 to 2001 or 2002, Genesis and I were becoming more and more friendly.
Right.
And I started making jewelry for Genesis and Lady J, because I am a jeweler still. Um, and it just sort of, morphed from there. And there was a point, I remember Jen and I were walking, I don't know why we were on St. Mark's Place. We were walking west from Odessa Diner. We used to like to meet up at Odessa in the East Village and, have some grilled cheese and snacks and whatever. And Jen started talking about, Psychic TV, and when we get to play together. And I remembered that I just looked at Genesis and I was like, Jen, you've never even heard me play. Like, I haven't auditioned. You don't even know that I would be the right player. And Jen just looked at me. He's like, you're the one.
Right. So
Which was
you
pretty
sort of had
funny.
a very good sort of vibrational quality, friendship with Jen.
Yeah, both Jen and Lady J. I mean, yeah, it started out as, a business relationship that turned into a really close friendship that turned back into, obviously it was sort of a band relationship, but still was I would consider Jen, one of the people I've been closest to in my life.
Amazing. Yeah, well, that's fantastic. I don't know if you've also, I mentioned Adele's book, but Dorothy Max Pryor also has written a book. She was in a band called Rima Rima, and I think Psychic TV for a
Uh,
short period of time. But I think she was the drummer. But it might have been a very brief moment with the band, actually.
yeah.
So did you give up your day job once you became part of Psychic TV?
No, I just got different day jobs. I just kept finding new things to do. Um, I was with one company for a while. Um, I don't know how I juggled it. I honestly don't. I would take vacation time, and then I would take unpaid time off and go out on the road. And yeah, I don't really know how I did it. I couldn't
Yes.
explain to you how I juggled it, but you become a really good juggler. If something means enough to you, you learn how to make it work. And I just somehow
Yes.
made it work.
That
Um,
was quite something. So did you go into the studio quite soon, or did you play mostly live with the band?
we played our first live show in New York City at the Choral Room in, I think it was 2003. Um, and then we toured after that. We did a couple of maybe 4 or 5 week tours through Europe, and it was mostly older. We were, you know, rehashing, the catalog, the old catalog of Psychic TV. And I don't remember what year. I have to go back through my own discography. It's funny how I don't remember. You probably know more about my career than I do at this point.
Because it was kind of 2006, 2007. You did Live in Moscow and Hell is Invisible. Was that?
Yeah. Okay. So Helen is Invisible. Yeah, that was a lot of new songs. I think we did that in Jersey City. We recorded that at David Max's studio, if I'm not mistaken. Um, yeah, and we got together. I mean, it's funny. We wrote in a lot of different ways with Psychic TV. I mean, I would come up with a lot of bass parts, and the other people would come up with parts, and um, we would jam sometimes for a couple of hours and just let recording, just record stuff, and then Eddie and Genesis would cut it up, and yeah, it was there were a whole lot of different uh,
Yes.
several different processes of writing songs. Later at the end, like toward the end, it was really a lot of cut ups, with the exception of one or two songs, because I would sometimes come in with like a completely um a song that I had written on bass that was like really complete, like
Was this
the
quite a
vocals.
different experience for you than you'd had before in your other sort of musical combos?
Um, no, I mean, I think um Pretty Boys we wrote in the studio with a couple of producers. Um, that's the most different way that I've ever written, because it was very intentional.
Yes.
Um, and I'm not saying that when I write it's unintentional, but I do feel very, this is going to sound weird, but I do feel like I kind of open this strange, like spiritual plane when I write. Like it just sort of smashes through my head or something. I don't know really how to explain
Yes.
my personal writing process, but um, I just feel like there's this opening, and it kind of comes through my head and sort of out my stomach and into my hands.
Well,
Uh,
that's a good thing to have.
sounds really weird, but that's kind of part of it. I don't always think that hard about it. Sometimes I wake up with songs in my head.
So
With
with
psychic,
the yeah, I was going to say with the album Alien Brain versus Maggot Brain, there's like two epic tracks, aren't there?
yeah,
Can you remember much of that sort of session and how that
yeah.
came about?
Those we just went into. We went into I think it was at Studio G, or Aluminum Foil Studios in Brooklyn, and we did go in as a band, and everybody just sort of jammed. Like we might have a couple of ideas going in, but then it was just sort of like get it down on tape, and then there were cut ups, and Jen would come in with words and just go into the booth and sort of do stuff over what we were doing. And I think it was kind of remarkable the way we wrote as a band in Psychic TV.
Yes.
Um, there's a lot of trust between the players, and I always felt like, you could look at those sort of recording sessions in two different ways. They could be terrifying, or they could be elating. And I always felt elated by it. Because at the end, it always like it was such a fine tuned machine. Like the last few recordings I just felt were just, I don't know, it was just so beautiful.
Did you, I mentioned Lemmy earlier, but he mentioned being in Hawkwind with David Brock and just said he'd never been in a band where they had such kind of understanding with each other, almost knowing what each other were going to be playing, that kind of ability that you're almost kind of vibrating at a certain level that you just find, it's going to be okay. Was that a similar experience you had with Psychic TV?
I mean, yeah, I especially the last version of the last group of musicians that we played with, which was John Weingarten on keyboards, Jeff Berner on guitar, myself on bass, Ed Leo Dad on drums, and then obviously Genesis singing. I really felt like it was just this incredible connection of musicians. It became such a well-oiled machine. We would sometimes, we wouldn't go out on long tours anymore. Many different reasons, mostly Genesis health. Um, but but we would book maybe 3 rehearsals before we would go on the road. We'd do one and look at each other and be like, yeah, we're fine. We don't have to do any more. Like it just it maybe that's just my feelings on it, but I think everybody would say the same. Like we really did. We understood each other musically. We knew how to support each other as players, and we would sort of jam a lot. We would jam live on stage. I mean, sometimes that was terrifying because Genesis would just point at you and you'd have to keep stretching and just do stuff, just keep going. And sometimes it would be great, and we would have this joke, sometimes like, somebody has to catch the baby, right? Like someone threw the baby in the air and someone has to catch the baby. And it just depended on like who Jen was counting on to catch that baby. Sometimes it would be me, sometimes it'd be Jeff, sometimes it'd be Eddie, but it would, be an extension of a song. Nobody knew exactly what we were doing, but somehow we managed to find our way.
Yes. And did you
through.
find with each of those kind of releases that you've got, each one had a special kind of quality to it, and different people were in different spaces, and that kind of created the sound that came out in the final mix?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was that everybody had their space. I mean, I never got involved in mixing in Psychic TV. That was really Jeff and Eddie, and I guess Jen had the final say in everything. But it was um, the first few bands that I'd had, I was very involved in, the final sounds and how levels were playing a part. With Psychic TV, I just sort of let go.
Yes. And
Let it happen.
because 2016 you did Alienness, didn't you? Was that one of your highlights with the band, or was it one of the fish scales falling kind of release?
No, I mean, I think Snakes might be one of my favorites. Alienist. I mean, they're all meaningful in a different way. They're
Yes.
it's definitely a each of them. When I look back at it, each of them kind of relates to a certain period in time. And some of them were happy, and some of them were not very happy at all. Like there was there were a lot of traumas in our lives. We lost a lot of people along the way, and
Yes.
the music is obviously reflective of those things.
Yeah. With Snakes, the songs are a lot more kind of tighter. Can you remember much of that particular session that you did for that release?
Yeah, well, I think those, on some of those songs, some of them came in as, a song. Like they didn't always start as a jam. They would become a jam, but like, some of them were really worked on a little bit. And I think it was also, we did really trust each other as players, and um you write in a different way. Like if you're
Yes.
growing, I think we were just growing as a band and as musicians, and we were writing in a little bit of a different way as well.
Yes. And what was it like when you realized, the band was over? Was that a difficult transition for you on a sort of emotional and sort of creative level?
Well, the band was over because Jen dropped her body. I mean, we would have continued to play if Jen didn't get sick. It wasn't, we continued to book shows. Just, we just couldn't do them anymore because of Jen's health. And we'd get to a point where Genesis would think I could do it. We'd book some shows, and then, Genesis would end up in hospital. So we couldn't do them in the end. So I guess 2018 was our last show in Berlin.
Yes. God, that doesn't seem that long ago now, but such a different period in our lives, really, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it really was. And it was incredible. It was, I remember, Genesis was so happy, and it was, she just really, she perked up, her illness. She was never really in remission, but she just had this, couple of months where she became quite chipper and was really, she seemed like her old self again for, just a few moments. And then it was just a decline. It was a slow, long decline of, chemo visits and hospital stays and, falls. And it was just, poor thing. She just had to struggle, and, hard. Cancer is a really hard thing. It's a hard thing to live through, and it's a hard thing to watch your friend and loved ones go through. And
Yes.
she was the bravest person, I'll tell you. She never complained, not once. I mean, I went to many chemo visits with her over the years. And I would watch, nurses try to find a vein and miss it, and over, and she never complained, not
Yes.
once.
It
It's
is true.
amazing.
It is amazing. So then when you realized, that was the end of that story, what was it like for you, thinking about playing music again? Was that tricky, or did you?
Well, what was hard for me is that I did have a solo project at one point, and this is hard to even talk about. Let me take a breath. I was playing. I released a solo EP called Sticks and Bones, and I guess in 2012 I recorded it. Might have been 2013, and my son played bass for me, um, with us as that on that project. And then in September of 2013, I lost my son. So it was a really hard thing for me to even want to play music anymore,
Yes.
especially after playing with him. And I couldn't wrap my head around it for a long time. And I just was trying to carry on. Part of the reason I started that project was I was working my way through my sorrows after losing Lady J, and it sort of started with a song that I wrote called Jackie's Song, which was really about my friendship and my love and my devotion as a friend to her. And I really wanted to record it. And my son was so happy to be playing music, and I was so happy to be playing with him. It was probably the happiest time in my life. And when he died, it was hard to even hear it. And I went back in the studio and I recorded one final song for him. And I guess I released it in 2014, but I really didn't want to play live. I didn't want
Yeah.
to play those songs anymore.
Yes.
So I just sort of released it because I felt like I should, and just let it be, and never toured and never did anything else. And I was able to do psychic TV. It always felt like a home. Like psychic TV was home for me.
Yes.
Like I felt so, there was so much love, and then obviously there's typical band problems. There's always going to be this one is angry with that one and that one is angry with this one. But I think for the most part, there was a lot of love in that band. And especially, I had Genesis, and I think because we had both had very serious losses, really grew closer. Um, and, she just became an incredibly important person. And she was one of the most intelligent people I've ever known. So we could have conversations for hours and hours and hours about life and death and what happens when, and just silly things, just laughing about fashion, or just friendship, a typical friendship. But playing and music, that became such a great outlet for me again. I've always felt that I am my truest self when I am playing, when I'm
Yes.
writing, when I'm on stage. So I was really grateful that I got to have that. And then when Jen got sick, I started, um, I had moved from Hoboken to where I live now, which is 2 blocks from the ocean, probably around 2015. Um, and I, made friends. There's a very big music scene in Asbury Park. I'm just a few blocks from Asbury Park. And I met some local musicians, um, including my current musical partner, um, probably about 2017. And I knew Psychic TV was winding down. And my brother introduced me to Pony, Sean Pony, Heath Tilburg,
Yes.
um, by saying, my sister's a musician. And Pony always makes this joke like, everybody's sister needs a pianist to play, a keyboard player. And, just making a joke that I was like some run of the mill somebody's sister, not knowing that I actually had like, a history of playing music and releasing music. And we met, we became friends, and Psychic TV was really at that point not playing at all anymore. We had a couple of tours, but everything was being canceled. And then in 2018, Pony and I just started really writing together. Um, and at first it was, again, like I was going through grieving a tremendous loss. And, Pony has his own traumas. He's moved as an immigrant. He immigrated from South Africa to New Jersey, just, and struggling at that point in that era here. We're in the Trump era
Yes.
of being an African immigrant. So it was kind of a South African immigrant. It was it was a difficult time for him as well. He has since gotten his citizenship and is a little bit less stressed out. I am definitely more healed, but I think a lot of the songs that we wrote, I'm jumping into Upstars now, but a lot of the songs that we originally wrote were both of us healing things. And I think some of the songs, are a little bit more melancholy. I feel like we're kind of heading in a little bit of a different direction where it's a little bit less so. And I think hopefully the next couple of songs that we write will reflect that growth a little bit.
Yes, because actually this is the one which starts with beautiful, isn't it? And
yes,
stars and crying time. Yeah. I must admit, the lyrics are stunning. I just really have enjoyed the lyrics and the passion with it as well. So, yeah. So were these kind of written in the last couple of years?
Yeah, those were written in the last few years. I mean, I went, Genesis dropped her body in March of 2020. And obviously it was another, Jen, I think we had like a very small funeral. And then I came home and everybody shut the doors. Like it was, COVID restrictions. Everybody was told to stay inside for weeks and weeks and weeks. And everything was, basically shuttered. And, I'm like sitting here with my own grief, not being able to really like be with other people. You weren't hugging people. And I needed to hug. Like I just needed support. So it was a really hard, it was a really difficult moment. And I just picked up and started writing again. I write my way through, I tend to write my way out of grief. And I write my way through difficult times. It's how I process it. I'm better now at being able to talk about my feelings, but for me, like music was always my feelings. So I was sort of processing some of the feelings, and I think it was maybe in the summer of 2020, I wrote Funeral Boots. So I felt like I needed to kind of come to terms with losing Genesis. And I remember Genesis is buried upstate New York and next to Lady J. And I remember it was a drizzly day and my boots were covered in mud. And I was just kept thinking about my boots and I called them my funeral boots. And anyway, I wrote this song called Funeral Boots for Genesis as a tribute. And at one point I bought an interface so that I could have, run a little bit of music through my computer and just record a little bit. And that point I thought maybe I should have Jeff do some work on it. And I asked John to do some work on it. And I had been in the hospital with Genesis for a heart appointment at one point, and I just recorded her heartbeat. And I sent it to Jeff, and Jeff made a loop of that heartbeat, and that became the sort of the drum part, as it sort of became a kick drum in Funeral Boots, which I recorded here and Jeff recorded there. And like somehow it all kind of came together, and it did get released on Not in My Future, which is I guess it's a tribute release to Genesis Pure from a lot of friends and family members.
Yes, my God, that's so. There's a lot to process there, isn't there? And you were you were kind of in London, sort of early in the year, and you met up with Paul B. Hampshire as well.
Yeah.
I did an interview with him kind of last year, actually, which was quite amazing because his career is quite extraordinary.
B is amazing. B is just such an incredible human being, and I obviously met B through Genesis because Jen and B were great friends as well. And I remember just, the first time I met B, just seeing how animated Genesis was with B, and Jen could be really, I'm not going to say standoffish, but Genesis didn't always want to socialize with people. it's hard to be Genesis pure. It's like, especially if you're on tour and there's so many fans and everybody wants to talk. And, we were protective of her. I would do something with Genesis where, Jen didn't smoke. And if somebody was spending a little bit too much time with her, I would just go up and say, "Hey, do you want a cigarette?" Which was just sort of my cue. Like, do you want me to take you away from this situation, and not have it be like, "Hey, are you okay?" And, but it was just sort of like my way of saying, "Are you okay? Do you need to get away?"
Yes. Amazing.
And
Yes.
it worked brilliantly. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know. I was going to say, B's been sort of releasing some kind of new material as
Oh, it's
well.
beautiful. It's so beautiful. Yeah,
Yes,
I
because
bought I bought the this was last year on Deus, the Getting the Fear recording. It's just incredible. I love B.
yes, I know, and I do love the work that he did in the very early 80s as well. It's such a fascinating story coming out of Sheffield. So yes, but I know he'd write this most amazing song about his lover who died, and it's kind of one of those really stunning songs. So it
Yeah.
is kind of interesting how, as we all get older, we're navigating through life, how we're sort of using things to process or get us to the next stage if we can.
I mean, if we're lucky enough, we do get to process them and not die in that, like lose ourselves in them. Not die, but lose yourself in it.
Yes, absolutely. So with the record that has just come out, or is coming out, so you did Sticks and Bones. This was the solo album that you did in
Yeah.
2016 that has Jackie's song. And was that single that you were talking about called Save Me or Stay?
Oh, I guess Save Me would be the single off of that one. Oh, no, there was a single. Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah, there was my friend Tom Nagovin put out a limited edition blue vinyl single, and I think it's Stay and what's the B-side?
Oh, I might be able to find out actually.
Can't remember it.
No, I can't either. Wait a minute. I'll probably be able to get it here. So your B-side to Stay was, oh, I don't know actually. It doesn't have one. Oh, it just has
Hold
a
on.
bit. Oh, Midnight.
Oh, it's Midnight. Oh, yes. I was just gonna go find it. Yeah, I wrote that. I wrote those songs so long ago. I've completely forgotten about them. Um, yeah, I mean, I was really proud of the songs that I wrote. It was the first time that I just decided that I was going to do something on my own. And again, like I said, it was sort of just to process another loss, and it felt like the right thing to be doing at the time. And I really enjoyed this songwriting process on all of them. And I feel like, by the end, I wrote that song Save Me, and I wrote it on a New Year's Eve one night. I just decided that I was going to sit home and got myself a fancy bottle of champagne and had some glasses of champagne and sat with my guitar and wrote all night. And that song was Save Me. I I don't know. It
Yes.
just felt like a great thing to do. And then I've had traditionally a New Year's Day party almost every year since I was probably in my 20s, and became like a very famous party. And I had a party the next day. So I wrote a song and then had a giant party. And I think I may have played the song at the party.
Fantastic. So
Mm.
as we get into this new decade, which is a bit odd, what's your sort of next stage? What have you got lined up for your next projects?
Well, Upstairs is still very much alive. Tony and I are both incredibly busy, um, both sort of working, but I'm trying to just kind of pull together a little bit of extra money so I can, go back into the studio again. Unless there's a record label that would like to come and support us. But yeah, I'm just trying to get enough money so I can get back into the studio in the fall and do a single. And we just spoke with Rocky Road Touring, um, who are based here in America, who have agreed to work with us, and hopefully we'll do some one-offs this year, but maybe some small little tours next year. Hopefully opening for some bigger acts, but also maybe a couple of things on our own.
Yes.
Um, and hopefully back in the UK and hopefully some European shows to come as well, because I feel like Psychic TV really had a great fan base in Europe and in the UK, and it would be great to, I feel like a lot of fans became personal friends as well, and it would be really nice to go back and see everyone again
Yes,
and be on
absolutely.
stage and play those songs. I mean, I think I'm really proud of the music that Pony and I did together, and we worked with Jeff Berner, who again was the Psychic TV guitar player, and is just a brilliant musician and one of the best human beings I've ever met. Like, he's just one of my favorite people to be around, and like super positive and um, just really supportive and lovely. And he plays live with us, and yeah, it's pretty great. I look forward
Yes.
to playing. Yeah, we've only played them live once at this point with a full band, and it was incredible. I mean, it blew me away. I was really thrilled with it.
Oh, that's so good. That's so good. Did you ever play? Have you played much in sort of the UK and Europe?
Well, with Psychic TV, yeah, a lot. I mean, we went over almost every year, twice a year usually.
Yes.
We would do like a couple of tours a year. It started out as like 4 or 5 week tours, and then it sort of ended up being like 10-day, 15-day tours. And we started out touring in a tour bus, and toward the end we were just flying in for gigs. So we'd fly to the UK, we'd play a gig, and then we'd fly to whatever, Spain or Portugal or Berlin. So we would fly in. We would usually have that night off because Jam would need to take a break, and we'd play the next night. We'd fly out the next day and do the next gig.
Yeah, it's an
Um,
amazing story because I noticed that I think yes, I saw that Bee's kind of a friend of Kathy Unsworth, who's just written a book on sort of, is it called Witches of the Season, about goth. I just wondered, have you ever sort of thought about documenting your own interest in life and musical career?
um, I have thought about it. I'm still a little raw around the edges to want to go back and really talk about a lot of the things that have happened in my life. I definitely documented on Facebook. I did tour diaries for years. I think I did them from 2014 on. Um, and I would at some point love to go back and pull all of those off and sort of do that as a book, because I think it would be fun. And people, I mean, I don't know if they're lying, but people have often said that they love reading them. They enjoy the diaries. And, I would throw up some photos of where we were. And the reason I started doing that was I originally would write an email to my son and my mom. And after my son dropped his body, it got really hard for me to just say, "Dear Mom," and not "Dear Mom and Jesse." So I
Yes.
thought I can still document this from my mother, she was sending it to my whole family anyway. And my whole family was on Facebook. So I was like, I'm just going to put it on Facebook and everybody can read it. And I don't care. It's nothing ever it's not ever that personal that I have to hide anything. And it was something I enjoyed doing. It kind of kept me busy. And it also reminded me, like, sometimes I'll go back and I'll read some of them because the memories pop up on Facebook, and I'm like, oh, I forgot that I was in Croatia that day, or like, I just forgot that I was in this small town in Italy that day, and this is we went on a walk and we saw this old church, and or went to an old castle. And it's nice for me to actually go back and reread some of them.
Yes, absolutely. No, it's yeah, I suppose there's a lot of it is about processing, isn't it? And sort of trying to
Yeah,
somehow find some peace with it. I mean, sometimes you don't
yeah,
always have to have peace, but sometimes you want to feel like it's kind of, I know it's a bit of a corny word, but healed, So, do you know what I mean?
yeah. I mean, I
Sort of
don't think you ever fully heal from losing a child. I think that you kind of uh, learn to exist with it. And I'm really happy these days. I feel really at peace with myself. I like the life that I've created for myself here. I don't really have a day job, so to speak. I work part-time at a music venue, which is really, really great. Um, they get a lot of national touring acts in, and I get to be around music all the time. And
Yes.
and I have my own jewelry company that I was at my bench today finishing 4 rings. So, yeah, I do the things I love. I get to play music, I get to make jewelry, and I work at an incredible music venue. I don't know how I got blessed. I don't always like using that word, but I do feel like I got blessed with this life that's kind of amazing. And I know I'm going to get back into the studio, and I know we're going to record some really beautiful, amazing tracks, and hopefully those will be out in the spring of 2024, and I'll get to get back on the road. I mean, now that we're not in the same pandemic rules and clubs are open and music is being played again, um, until the next thing happens, I hope that we get to go out and do those things now.
Yes, well, I noticed so many bands like the Bush Tetras are sort of reformed with a few extra members. And I think that in the band you mentioned, was ESG. I think
ESG,
I
yeah,
think they're doing various things, and if not a film about their career. So,
yeah,
and
good.
yes, and Z Records is bringing out books, and it's all it's a lot of activity at the moment. I can
Yeah,
feel. So
I love it. It's very exciting. It's very
it is.
exciting.
And I do have to say, I thought, that EP you've done, Tuesdays with Stars, and I do think Beautiful is just a great. I think your vocal is stunning. I think it's absolutely brilliant. So, yes, I hope you'll get back in the studio and write some more and sort of record some more material.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
That would
Yeah,
be
we will for
good.
sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, I'm
look,
looking forward to it.
Look, this has been amazing. So when I ever go to another screen, it all goes a bit black, actually.
I thought maybe you were ready to go to bed.
No, no, no. It's just funny. I was just like, oh yes, I know. I was looking at what your the homepage of your website, and it's a very. I haven't got any background light because it's actually got a bit dark, actually. So that's why I go suddenly dark. Actually, sorry about that. But look, this has been amazing. Thank you ever so much for giving me the time for this. And if you want, I can always send you the link, and you can always put it on your social media platform sites if you so care. But
Oh,
it's been a real
absolutely.
pleasure to catch up and hear your story and your musical career. And it's been great to sort of be able to access so much stuff on Bandcamp as well. So when I do when I put it up, I'll put those links as well on Bandcamp so people can click on them, hopefully, and yes, discover more of your work because it's amazing.
Oh,
So
thank
yes,
you.
well, thank you. And
Yeah,
yes. And did you enjoy your time coming to the UK and Ireland, I noticed?
oh, I loved it. I'd never been to Ireland. Psychic TV in my, in the 2 decades that I played with Psychic TV, or nearly 2 decades, we never played in Ireland, and I've always wanted to go. So it was incredible. I want to go back, and I have some very, very close friends in London. Um, and we've decided that we need to see each other twice a year now. So um, between them coming here and me going there, I'm definitely coming back at least once a year.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. Well, yes. And it was nice that you've got those little connections with people like B as well, which is really nice.
Yeah, yeah,
Because
for
I think it was
sure.
last autumn he got the band back together, one of his early bands, and they did some dates in Whitby and various other places up on the northeast coast. So yes, it's been good. So yes, I keep seeing posts that he put up of various projects he's doing. He's so creative. It's
He is.
amazing.
I adore him. I'm hoping actually when we got together, I guess it was a month or two ago. We talked about maybe doing something together, either here or there. So hopefully that will come to fruition at some point.
That would be a dream ticket. That would be a dream ticket. Well, look, thank you ever so much, Alice, for giving me the time for this. And yes, all the best and have a lovely evening. And I'll probably go to bed soon. Anyway,
All right. Yeah, it's been
thank
a pleasure, David. Thank you
thank
so
you.
much.
Yes, thank you. Take care.
You too. Ciao. Bye.
No, just find the end. Bye. And that, dear listener, as you could gather, is the end of the interview. I know. Magic stuff. That was a huge thank you to Alice Genese for giving me the time for that. I will put a link below in the notes of her latest musical project that you can find. This has been the C86 Show. I'm David Eastauugh. If you want to contact me, you can on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Just do C86 Show. All these interviews have been archived on Spotify, iTunes, and Podbean. Indeed, they have. Anyway, have a great week. Stay safe.